Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the second session of the Track 1 debate. This is also your reminder that if you are hearing me, you are actually in track number 1, and if you have signed up for track number 2, please switch over at this point by clicking at the designated button at the lower part of your screen that says track number 2. Before the break, we've been looking at the state of play of the sustainable digital transformation of the agricultural value chain. With this second session, we will now look at the needs and perspectives of different stakeholders in the field. Before I hand over to the moderator of this session, I would like to remind all of us that you can pose questions have time to address your questions at the end of this session. We might not get to all of the questions, but you can be sure that we note your questions and that they will not be forgotten. With that being said, I am pleased now to introduce the moderator of this session. It is Professor Dr. Engel Hessel. Professor Hessel is Commissioner for Digitalization and Director for Digital Innovation at the German Federal Ministry of Food and Agriculture since the year 2018. At the University of Göttingen, she habilitated in agricultural engineering and is associate professor at the University of Göttingen since the year 2011. In 2017, she also became director of the Thunen Institute of Agricultural Technology. Professor Hessel, the digital floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Martin. And welcome back, everybody, to the discussion Shaping the Future. In total, over 1,000 people have registered to this conference, and this shows the importance of the topic sustainable digital transformation of the agricultural value chain. In the next hour, we want to discuss with you the overall question, what is needed from policymakers at EU level as well as national level to make the digital transformation in agriculture successful for all stakeholders. To do so, we invited 4 organizations to give introductory pitches of about 4 to 5 minutes. The 4 organizations are Copa Cogeca, the European Association for Farmers and Agri-Cooperatives, the EEB, the European Environmental Bureau, the CEMA, the association representing the European agricultural machinery industry, and Bitkom, Germany's digital association. We will start the discussion after all 4 representatives have spoken. And first of all, I'd like to ask Daniel Acevedo to speak for Copa Cogeca. Daniel is director in the commodities and trade team of Copa Cogeca, representing almost 70 national farm and organizations and cooperatives in Europe. He is an environmental engineer and currently the coordinator of Copa Cogeca Task Force on Agricultural Technology. Daniel, you have the word. And you may share our slides now with us. I see on my screen, it's already there. So I hope it will work everything fine. You're on the floor now.
Perfect. This shows the importance of connectivity. Thank you very much. Coming from a farming background, a family farm in the north of Portugal, it's for me a privilege to be here and be the voice of European farmers and agri-cooperatives. So our first pitch is importance to have EU common framework, to have a EU single market that works and deliver with common rules and common principles. We has benefited from the common agricultural policy and European policy that has actually delivered in the last 60 years in terms of its objectives, and in particular, it was very important during the COVID-19, showing the resilience of the European farming sector, the agri-food sector, but also delivering on food security. So from our point of view, it is key that the European framework enables EU farmers and cooperatives to invest in sustainability that allows all the production methods to contribute to the sustainability objectives. And from our point of view, it will not be the technology that will drive, it is about the strategy that will need to be the real driver for technological and digital transformation. And therefore, all the EU policies, they need to align. There are EU policies, they need to align baseline that will enable European farmers, European agri-food business to invest in new technologies on data sharing, digital, and that will help them to deliver in the EU framework. So starting, I have made a small list of aspects. I would mention the importance to have an integrated decision-making system that will very much integrate artificial intelligence, to have a transparent and trust on data sharing. And here I would like to underline the work that's been done together with SEMA and EVO and other EU organizations, so coming out with a code of conduct on agricultural data sharing, and that will enable us to engage in the dialogue with the European Commission on the regulatory framework governance data that has been put forward very recently. But I would like to underline the importance of infrastructure, connectivity, enable interoperability to make sure that we have access to the digital technologies is extremely important. So coming out with standards and security. And then, of course, training and digital skills, advisory systems will enable farmers and cooperatives to implement. And again, access to investment, but also digital innovation hubs, which are actually extremely important to bring together all the actors to deliver on digital. And 2 points that I would like to underline before ending. The first one is the need to integrate the farming community from the beginning in terms of research and innovation efforts. You'll be surprised how we still get so many people coming to farms and say, I have the solution, but I did not integrate you in the process. And of course, innovative regulatory framework. We need to make sure, for example, drones are accessible for farmers to use in order to deploy low-risk substances. But for example, also in terms of new breeding techniques, today the EU regulatory framework is still not up to date. And with this, in terms also access to land that is very important for young farmers, I would like to conclude my initial remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniel, for your statement. And as I stated before, we will directly continue with the EEB with Dr. Denise Dupé. Denise is Senior Policy Officer for Agriculture at the European Environmental Bureau. Denise holds a PhD in Agriculture Economics and a master degree in International Development and Rural Policy. She is very international. She has studied in Belgium, in France, and in the Netherlands. Denise, the floor is yours. And if you have any slides, please share them with us.
Thanks a lot. I don't have any slides, and I hope my speech will be convincing enough without any slides. So first of all, I would like to thank the organizer for putting this up. I think it's a great opportunity for us to be part of this panel. So there is a lot for everyone, I think, to gain by getting a better technical and economic understanding of production process via digitalization. And it could be beneficial for farmer, like this has just been explained. Farmer will gain in efficiency in technical and in economic terms. For instance, for nutrient management, we could maximize yields while minimizing costs. The farming sector will also, to a small extent, have a small role to play via digitalization in the energy transition. Farmers shall be part of the answer for decentralized energy production and consumption, and digitalization could help. It could be beneficial for educational and advisory services, because by pulling anonymous data from several entities together, we could have a better understanding of biological and economic processes. We could gain from each other practices by benchmarking them. The simple fact of pulling data together is interesting. It could reduce information asymmetries between parties if the information is shared among different parties. It could also be beneficial for the processors in the food value chain. For instance, digitalization could help in reducing food waste. But it also could be very beneficial for consumers. By bringing the environmental, consumer, and the digital agenda together, we could provide consumers with sufficient product information to enable them to make the most environmental choice, for instance, by having a passport product. And we could also answer the demand for safer products. Finally, digitalization is also key for policymakers. It shall play a key role for monitoring and evaluating the success of policies. Here, the problem is not so much the lack of data, but rather how to integrate them and make sense of them. So the limit is not so much the technology, but rather an organizational issue. Digitalization should also help policymakers to enforce and help the implementation of environmental laws. If you think about it, it's already the case, for instance, for speed limits when you are driving your car. We should further develop the use of spatial monitoring system to identify illegal action regarding environmental laws. But digitalization has also some risk. Digitalization creates significant ethical risk, from privacy-related risk to access and use of information or unfair competition in digital market. Digitalization itself could have a heavy environmental footprint. The energy and the resources used for digitalization will have major potential impact on climate change and the environment. Unless very significant efforts are made, studies show that by 2030, the ICT in the total of greenhouse gas emission of the EU could jump from 1.4 to 14%. It uses rare untouched material, so it's important that the development of the digitalization agenda is done in a circular way. Finally, the current tools on reporting data are currently not fit for purpose to enable compliance, promotion, and benchmarking of progress towards the delivery of the EU Green Deal objectives. So to conclude, promoting digitalization for people and the planet demand a policy initiatives to define pathways to carbon and environmental neutrality and significant reduction in the material footprint from the digital sector. The promotion of digitalization shall be for people and the planet, with measures to support public trust that the ethical dimension is fully accounted, and should target to focus people health and well-being of the planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Berenice, for sharing your points of view. We will now go on and continue with Zema and Dr. Ivo Hostens. Ivo is a bioengineer holding a PhD in applied biological science. Since 2015, he works full-time for Zema, and since 2019, he has the function of Secretary General of the EURAGRI, the European Society for Agricultural and Biosystems Engineering. Ivo, you have the word, and please share your slides with us.
Yeah, sorry. It was very difficult once I shared my screen to actually unmute myself. So you can hear me, Professor Hessel?
Yes.
Yes, my apologies. So
no problem. Go on.
It's just my 4 minutes, my 5 minutes are running really quickly here. Before I start, I always want to explain a little bit about my industry, and in particular that the fact that we are the living for farmers, that we deliver dedicated apparatus to them. And it's not only about the big companies that we have. In total, we represent about 7,000 companies, mainly SMEs, and also micro enterprises. All of them want to see themselves as transforming themselves to high-tech solution providers. And we probably will need that for farmers to stay competitive and to comply with future stringent sustainability criteria. And what Daniel said is right. There is a need for a strategy for better uptake of high-tech solutions, and digitization is for us a key in order to increase that by aggregating information from these solutions, and by this to improve the data farm management and the field processes. Let me now do this. So it was already indicated, EU Code of Conduct. For us, it's like the basis. It's trust by defining principles. It's about knowing the actors, their role, their responsibilities, their rights. But we, of course, as an industry, as a tech industry, we are also looking at, or feel a responsibility to also work on trust by proper design of technology. We have already developed since years ISOBUS, which allows connectivity between vehicles brand independent. And of course, we developed also systems to put this massive amount of data already produced into the cloud. But as you can see here, it's OEM clouds, it's certain platforms, it's islands. They need to be connected. So also based on the experience we have, we are building now on an open source interface that should allow in the future easy, secure, automatic transfer of data between platforms. And we do this within Atlas with AEF, the Agricultural Industry Electronics Foundation. So also security, for instance, is an important element, and we have developed already some solutions there. Important as well, what I want to say here is that from our industry itself, we see ourselves as much as risks for being taken up in this whole fight on data. And we want to stress that as agricultural machinery industry, we support a fair data market with free choice of platform used by farmers. And that's also the reason why we are so engaged on defining such an open source interface. That doesn't mean it solves everything, as indicated also here in this yellow part. There is still the aspects of data governance and data sovereignty on who gets what data, when and how, and certainly certain ethical aspects around that. But what does that mean for us in terms of engagements we need from governments? So I've put a number of things together. First of all, overall, don't regulate over hastily. There is a lot of hypothetical threats that people are putting forward, but some of them can be solved technological. Solve will probably need some further regulation. A lot of it has to do with harmonization of putting a general framework where people can hang up their different solutions. And I think the Commission is at this moment still doing a good job, but pressure could rise, of course. Rather bottom up than top down, our industry has its own solutions and developments, and they should be taken into account. Also, whenever you go for certain legal solutions, please focus on the basic requirements and let all the rest from details be done in standards. And in order to progress fast, there is a specific need, we think, for standardization, whether it's CEN, ISO, ETSI. And there are two examples that I put forward here. Government reporting, so e-reporting from farmers will be very important for having a lean administration. And there will be not one particular player that will come forward and say, I will put all my resources here. There will be a need for support. The same is there for public data. A lot of platforms that we know of are not really sharing public data yet. There is a lot of work still to be done there in terms of data formats, ontologies, etc. So this is something, it's already in the proposed regulation for data governments to do this public data sharing, to work on that. We need to develop the necessary standards. Then also, if we want to do data sharing also over nations, we need to ensure that we know where the data coming from. So an electronic identification, so that you can link the data to somebody, and having a non-specific, sector-specific universal digital passport, we think that might be of interest. It exists in a lot of nations. We have it here in Belgium as well. I have the example of ITSME, for instance. But we need to have something that works on a European level. And then, of course, last but not least, we need to stress that research remains important. We're very happy that the European Parliament is pushing that the levels of funding for research stay high, and we really ask for dedicated goals with sector involvement, that they stay there, and also that there's possibility for EU coordination on the many national initiatives that are currently ongoing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivo, for your statement. And now we go on, and last but not least, we will continue with the organization Bitkom and Andreas Schweikart. Andreas is the head of the digital farming at Bitkom. He studied political and administrative science. In his current role at Bitkom, he promotes the exchange between agricultural and digital companies, startups, science, and politics. Andreas, the floor is yours, and we are looking forward to your statement.
Thank you very much for the invitation. As you said, I'm head of digital farming at Bitkom. Bitkom itself is Germany's leading tech association. We represent over 2,000 corporates, and our agricultural ecosystem consists of providers of digital technology, such as IT companies, but also corporates from the machinery industry, agribusiness, agtech startups, and so on. So our goal is to promote digital farming in Germany and the EU. And we see, as we could see in this conference today, digitalization is no science fiction, it is in reality. And the goal must be to foster the use of these technologies and bring them even more into practice. And how this can be done, I want to focus on three aspects. First aspect is digital infrastructure. And by that, I do not only mean broadband or connectivity in rural areas, which is an important point, but also access to public data. As you know, this data is key for usability of digital technologies and also innovation. My favorite example, positive example, is the European Copernicus program. Last year, we passed the incredible number of 10 petabyte of satellite data that has been made available for free. Corporates, startups take this data and develop with the help of AI products that, for farmers, and this boosted innovation and has a huge impact on technological progress in agriculture. But this is not enough. We need these satellite images in combination with other public data, such as where are field boundaries, what kind of pesticides are authorized in which place. And most importantly, this data has to be made available digitally through APIs and platforms across the EU. My second point I want to stress is data exchange. Only if we are able to share data among different stakeholders, we can achieve full sustainability along the value chain. I want to focus on a very specific part, the exchange between the government and the farmers. As you know, farmers communicate a lot with government authorities. When you think of compliance, when you think of application forms, if the farmer could send all of his data with just one click to government authorities, this would save a lot of bureaucracy on both sides. We conducted a survey at the beginning of the year among 500 farmers in Germany and asked them if they would willing to share the data. The result is that they are, if they see a benefit from it. And among the top benefits is less bureaucratic effort. We can use digitalization to solve this problem. Of course, the data sovereignty, data ownership has to remain with the farmer. My third and last point is we need to fund investment in digital technologies, especially for smallholder farmers. We see that investment costs are still the biggest obstacle for the use of digital technologies. And there are already investment programs in place, but they have to be tailored and adapt also to new developments that we can see. One development is that we see a shift in business models from one-off payment, so you pay one time for a machine, more and more to pay-per-use or farming as a service models. These business models make digital technologies even more attractive and scalable, especially for smallholder farmers. And these investment programs that are already in place or in the future, they have to take these new business models into account and tailor their programs to these new forms of business models and take advantage of it. So I will stop here and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Well, thank you, Andreas. And now we will go on. First of all, I like to thank all speakers for sharing their insights, their perspectives, and their ideas in this discussion. And now we have time to address questions from the audience. But as I see, there aren't any questions yet. And so I would like to start the discussion. And I would like to ask Ivo. You stated out that we need an electronic identifier to know where the data are from. And I'm wondering if we just want to know where the data are from, but I think we also need to know who is using this data and for which application. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think there are two things. One is indeed the identification of the person to whom the data belongs, or the person who wants to use that data. I think that's where you need this electronic identification. The other thing is more related to traceability, that you actually also trace to where the data all goes, so that the farmer has an idea who is using it, and at the end can also decide that that he doesn't want to share it anymore, for instance, or that he can learn from that, who is all interested in that data. So these are all elements, of course, to be discussed, but yeah, I think they see them as two different things.
Okay, thank you. So my first, I want to ask the audience again, just you have the chance to ask questions to these experts. Don't hesitate to do that. I want to tell you that we had last week a roundtable discussion at expert level of the EU member states agriculture ministry, and the aim of this roundtable discussion was the exchange among all EU member states on current and planned activities as well as strategies with respect to the digitalization in agriculture. I would like to know of all of you four, what is your point of view? What is the main objective to be done by policymakers? You stressed so many objectives, what we should do in future, but what do you think is the main one which we should do in the nearest future? Maybe Andreas can start.
Sure. I would stress my first point, the public data access. So we have to overcome also borders, not only in Germany. As you know, we have a lot of borders and federal structures. Mm-hmm. This is a challenge, I would say, as every federal state has sometimes their own platform, their own policies on how they share this data, in what formats, and so on. This is a huge challenge also for the industry to use this data, but also across Europe, of course. We have to overcome these borders and make this data available in all countries across the whole European Union.
Okay, thank you. So your main concern are the public data. Thanks for that. Who wants to be the next? I think Daniel, he is moving his hand. So Daniel, go on.
Thank you. One key aspect that we have been advocating from a long time has to do with infrastructure, in particular access to broadband. Even today, many rural areas still don't have access to reliable. It's not only having access to broadband, it's also having access to reliable broadband. So it's like you can imagine some farmers today, they still don't have access to electricity. They need to keep an automated system to keep their products cold, to make sure that when electricity doesn't come, they have a secondary point. So for internet, it will be crucial when you have a machine going through the field that you have constant access to broadband so that you can communicate. This is a very simple example, but this is a key point. And the second is enabling farmers and cooperatives to keep investing. Today, more and more farmers are asked to get more value out of the market. At the same time, the public support is decreasing. It is crucial that the farmers are enabled to keep investing in sustainability, but that they also have access to safe technologies that are available to other farmers around the world. Otherwise, it will be very hard to compete, to keep the high quality, to get the return for the market, and at the same time delivering on the objectives for example, of the Green Deal that are very, very ambitious and that we welcome and we want to deliver, but we need to have access to safe technologies.
Okay, thank you for your statements. You stressed out two main points, but anyhow, we go on with Berenice, maybe?
Yeah. Well, for the European Environmental Bureau, who is an environmental organization, we are not looking at digitalization as really, the hard stick to bring sustainability in the farming sector. We are looking at the digitalization on how the digitalization can actually deliver on the biggest challenge for the European economy, which is the climate and biodiversity crisis that we are facing. In the agricultural sector, agricultural sector is the single largest source of the biodiversity collapse that we are witnessing in Europe. It's source of water pollution, greenhouse gas emission, air pollution. So here we see this digitalization as a tool to enable policymakers to design and enforce better policy, really as a tool to improve and help decision makers in their work. So that would be my first priority.
Okay, thank you. And last but not least, Ivo, what is your main priority?
I can find myself in a lot of things that have been said already. But maybe if I choose another one, I see a bit of a split between, on one side, the competitiveness of farmers, and on the other hand, the sustainability goals, and so what governments actually want to realize and for which they are willing to provide money. And in that sense, I think e-reporting will be important, because the complexity of reporting will probably increase if you want farmers really to prove how sustainable they actually are in the use of their machines, in the use of whatever inputs they're using, how they handle their fields, and how they treat their fields. And therefore, with e-reporting, with the different tools that they have to monitor themselves what is happening, and if they can actually use that to provide the necessary information to governments, this will make life a bit easier. I think you pay the farmers, those that do the right thing, and you pay them the right price for it. And that's the only way probably it will work. Otherwise, it will be just, again, subsidies for depending on size and hectares and etc. So that I think would be
an
important point. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that point. So we have already 4 questions, but I'm still waiting for more questions. So right now I make a little break with the discussion, because during the break before this session, we asked you, the audience, 3 questions, and I would like to present the answers of these questions. Our first question, maybe we can see the slides, the results of our questionnaire. The first question was, what is your field of activity? And for all of us, I guess it is interesting to know which people are participating today in today's conference. 5 response options were available, and I can already see the live votes. I hope you too soon. And for me, I'm not wondering about the results, because 49% of the participants are from science. So I think, yeah, I'm not wondering about it. But the second most people came from politics and administration. And only 1% of the people are from agricultural practice, and only 6% from agricultural advisory service. So it's really a few, and from industry only 10%. This was the first question. And in total, 208 people took part at this question. And the next 2 questions, we only had 34 and 32 votes. It's really a pity, only 34 votes, because I'm wondering, I just got the actual number of participants in this section, and it's more than 200 people are listening to us, and only 34 people voted. And the results of the next question, the question was, in your view, what is currently the main obstacle to the digital transformation of agriculture? 4 response options were available for question 2, and we have 2 answers with nearly the high numbers. It's first of all the lack of skills and knowledge in the farming community, and the second highest number was the cost-benefit relation is unsatisfying. Only 12% voted for access to the internet coverage, but it depends, I think, on the area where you live. And 21% voted for data protection and ownership. And I'm really happy right now. The number of people voting in this question is rising right now. The question 2 has now 74 answers. So maybe we come later again, but the percentage doesn't change a lot. Still, the highest numbers are for lack of skills and knowledge in the farming community. Well, and now I come to the question number 3. The third question was, how can policy and founding agencies increase the use of digital farming? And again, 4 response options were available, like for question 2. And we are still receiving answers. We received now about 40 answers, and over 50% voted for support and education of training for farmers and contractors. So what can policy and founding agency do? The highest number was for support and education. And the lowest number with 7 or 6% was encourage farmers and contractors to purchase appropriate solutions. So maybe we leave this questionnaire open, and we can send the results afterwards to all participants. Now I come back to the discussion. We received some questions. The first question I received was, which countries in the EU have implemented some digital IDs, and how that particular country arranging digital exchange of data? So is this question goes to Ivo, or I think Ivo can answer, maybe Daniel too?
Yeah, from my side, I can just give the example of Belgium, where we have XP. This is a tool that you can even use to access your own bank accounts, although that normally when you access banks, even that is sometimes recognized. And that gives you then access, for instance, to document repositories where your mutualities, where your governments can post documents for you, even your taxes are in there, your pensions can be accessed by it. So this gives you the tool to access a lot of facilities within your country, here in Belgium at least. I'm not so familiar with other countries. I just gave it as an example. I know there are other nations, but maybe Daniel knows more about that, certainly also for the farming community.
Daniel, do you know more?
I'm in line with Ivo. I'm not aware. I suspect a few other countries, like for example Estonia, might have the same, but I cannot. I'm not absolutely sure. I know about Belgium because I also use it. Even though I'm Portuguese, I live in Belgium and I use exactly this identificator. Yes.
Okay, and the Bitkom, do you know more about it, Andreas?
I know that there will be in the future business models that build on these EIDs. So they are not in place yet, but I think this will have a huge impact as well, because you can then track and trace the actions of farmers and actually remunerate it. And this does not have to be put in place by a government authority. There are also business models, for example, to increase biodiversity or reduce carbon emissions, which will build on this on this concept.
Okay, thank you. Then I have another question. It says Doris Marquardt, she talked earlier this morning, this day, said for better insight in adoption of digital technologies by monitoring and benchmarking. This is a goal. And somebody is asking, how can we contribute to that, to better monitoring and benchmarking? Maybe this is a question for Berenice.
Well, there are several Horizon 2020 projects that are looking on how we can use new ICT tools for monitoring and evaluating European policy, and how this can be linked to paying agency data in member states. So there is ongoing research on how to do it. And like I mentioned before, I think the bottleneck is not so much the availability of data, but rather like once you get data from different technology and from different institutions, how do you integrate them? And more importantly, how do you make sense of them to make them useful and informative from a, let's say, a paying agency point of view or a government point of view? So that's one, but it's not something new. I mean, monitoring using data like Copernicus data is already done for environmental reasons. For instance, if you is used to spot illegal dumping. So this kind of things is already existing. It just needs to be further boosted.
Does somebody else wants to answer to that question? No? Okay. Then I have another one. It's how can mainly regional value change be strengthened by digitalization? Regional products. I think maybe Bernice, she's lifting her hand. Maybe you want to answer again?
Yeah, I think, there is a lot now, if you can see more on the consumer side, apps developing for really, trying to directly consume at your proximity, around you, directly with farmers. So there's really new, let's say, economies developing where digitalization play a role. But the technology is not you here, it's really the use. How are we going to promote the use and this kind of initiatives? So that's for policymakers to decide to which degree are they going to support such type of social innovation, I would call, rather than technology innovation.
Okay. Somebody else? Yes,
Yeah,
Nadia, please. You're lifting the hand.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point because, as mentioned by Bernice, it is indeed the technology is there now. It's a question on how to make sure that the farmers, for example, or cooperatives, they can access new markets. Some of the times the new market is just next to you. We are supporting an EU project on smart chains, smart short chains. This is also an opportunity for farmers to be able to deliver another product, because the same technology that could bring you to China to sell products that can also be used to sell it around the corner. And if we see the examples of, for example, in the forestry markets, digital markets, and also, for example, on livestock markets, where you can market your animal without moving it, so that you can have access at the same level that big corporations or big players. But at the same time, you bring your product at the same platform, and you can have access to that market. It be a strong player. So this is something we see it very. We want to see this developed. Farmers want to deliver more information to the consumer. We have very little tools, digital technology. Some of them, like for example blockchain, not the only one. They could actually help us to deliver further information on how we produce, and also to understand how the consumer. What is the consumer looking for? What are the trends? How can we adapt our production in order to match the consumer preferences.
Thank you. Somebody else wants to answer? Okay, then we go on with the next question. The next question is interesting too. And somebody is asking, to what extent are these digitalization issues relevant for developing countries? And are there any collaborative research projects in that sense? There are many, I think, but you have to answer, not me. Daniel is smiling.
If maybe I can answer.
Yeah, sure. First Andreas, then Daniel. Please, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, digitalization also plays a role in development countries, definitely. We've had a conference last week, Digital Farming Conference, where also a representative of the World Food Program was there. And they have, for example, an innovation accelerator in Munich where they foster these kind of innovations that are of use to end hunger in development countries. For example, there's something like an Uber for tractors. So these kind of ride sharing offers that can be used. Also, blockchain is used for payment, also to trace food from farmer to consumer. So there are surprisingly many digital technologies and applications that are already used.
Okay, thank you for this comment. I like the Uber for tractors. It's very nice. Daniel, you want to say something?
Yeah, I agree with Andreas in terms of technical side. It will deliver a lot of opportunities in terms of infrastructure. As Africa, for example, Africa is behind in terms of infrastructure, and digital technologies connected with mobiles can help. But I would like to underline, and also in terms of political aspect, because the digital technologies can enable farmers to get together in order to organize themselves and to have a political voice also in terms of cooperatives, so that they can engage in the society together with a political decision and push for the policies that actually are important for them. And we have been very much in contact with many of the developing countries through the World Farmers Organization. And we see that also this new model can actually provide, the farmer organizations can provide different services to the farmers when they make contracts, for example, with technological companies. So this is also an opportunity in order to get farmers to have a voice, to organize themselves, and to be able to integrate in the political scheme.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Is somebody else, Ivo or Berenice, you want to say something to this question?
Well, I've been engaged once with some more international organizations when it came to data sharing, and we saw some examples there in Africa, where it came to mostly that it was not so much of it was for actually including them a bit in what the markets were interested in. That most of these people, they grow something. If they have a surplus, they will go to the markets. With just a simpler cell phone, they would get certain information on the prices for certain products, so that they knew when it was a good time to go to these markets. So these aspects, yes, I've seen, but for the rest, I'm not aware.
Okay, thank you. Berenice?
Yeah, I actually had the same experience than Ivo regarding the African market, where we see that, I mean, they don't have PC, but they all have cell phones. And for price discovery and for payments is really key to them. So indeed, we see happening some, let's say, small mechanism using cell phone for knowing when they have to move somewhere, which price it is on the market, and how to facilitate the payment. And so this kind of small experience, but I would say the configuration, the structural, let's say, the structural issue regarding digitalization were quite different from what we see in Europe.
Okay, thank you. So I have one other question. It's about blockchain. What is your view on verifiable credentials under blockchain to control and track things and farmers, and at the same time being aligned with the GDPR? Who wants to answer about? I think, Daniel, you were talking about blockchain before, so maybe you can go on with this technique.
Well, we see blockchain as one of the technologies available that can help. It is still at the very early stages. It still needs to prove it itself. There are many pilot projects ongoing in order to use blockchain to provide additional information to consumer, to make sure that, for example, you can certificate a certain type of product that has been undertaken a certain production method. And we see that as very positive. We want to see these pilot projects to come to success. We need just to be careful that that the data that will be there will be then shared among all the partners. That the farmer will also have the data. That it will not be able to be used by for unfair trade practices, for example. And that we need to make sure that the investment that is necessary to be done in terms of I would say infrastructure, but all the systems that you need to use, it shouldn't be just done by the farmer, because in this case the farmer will have to invest on that specific blockchain service, and then it will be very difficult to choose other products or to bring the data and use others. So we need to make sure that the farmer will also share not only the duties but also the value.
Okay, thank you. Somebody else? Yes, please, Ivo.
Yeah, I know there are activities ongoing in the standardization body ETSI on ledger technology. So looking at indeed blockchain as, but not only on blockchain, but yeah, that was now the specific case to investigate what could be done indeed on traceability. But as far as it goes, I think it's all a trial and error, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Andreas?
Yeah, just want to add that, I mean, we still look for, there's still not the one big use case for blockchain. There have been some to trace back eggs, for example, that are produced sustainably, and then you see a certificate on it, and the consumer might be more prone to buy these kind of eggs. I think when we look at blockchain, it's also the business model will be crucial. So I think the farmer also has to benefit from it because he shares the data, and we have to have like a return mechanism that the value also stays with the farmer, and he or she also benefits from sharing the data on the blockchain. But I think we will see a lot more use cases in the future.
Okay, there's another question coming in on the blockchain. Some food sustainability researchers have claimed that blockchain is a distraction. What is your opinion? Maybe Berenice?
Well, I will need to read the statement of the researcher to know what exactly they mean. But what I can say, what is a distraction when we talk about digitalization in general, is that we tend to focus on digital technology rather than on social innovation. To us, given the challenge that we are facing, environmental challenge, just pushing for hardcore technology will not do the trick. If we really want to promote change, we need to propose to use digitalization as a tool to help the farming sector to bring systemic change, including social innovation. So to really rethink the farming system. So going toward the promotion of digital technologies that push farmers to further invest and increasing the scale, etc., will lead us into a wall, environmentally, maybe. So that's where we are standing right now, and the research community as well. So if they refer to that, yes.
Okay. So
I would like to add and agree that digital technologies are tools that we can use. We should focus on the political and environmental goals. We have ambitious goals in the EU, And we can look at how digital technologies can help to achieve these goals. And it may be blockchain, it may be AI, which is already in place, it may be different technologies. And if we can prove that these kind of applications, that these kind of technologies are of use to achieve these goals, then we should definitely support that. But not all, of course, not all technologies, might in the end bring, all the results we want to see. So I just would like to add that.
Yes, thank you for this comment. So we are already close to 5 o'clock. I have now one last question to all of you, and we are close to Christmas time. And if you have a wish to the policy, what will it be? What will be your wish to the policymakers? Who wants to start? Only 1 or 2 minutes, not too many wishes, only one wish. Is there somebody who wants to start? Daniel is smiling.
I can finish as I started. The biggest Christmas gift that we could be given is to enable us to make the necessary investments in the technology. I think what Bernice and Andreas had mentioned, it's not the technology that is going to be the key. It is a strategy that you can put in place. You are enabled to invest in the right strategy, in the right technologies that will enable us to deliver on sustainability. And technology, digital is only one of the tools, but we do need to be enabled to invest. And of course, I can never terminate my point without saying broadband in rural areas is key. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for your wish. So next one is Ivo.
I think I can fully support Daniel, and maybe very specifically investment in high-tech solutions. I'm very much in favor, of course.
Okay, thank you. Berenice?
Well, I would rather going an investment in people and the planet here. So really, like, if data have to be developed, and really we need to have a better way to integrate them and use them. So developing in the infrastructure around them.
Okay, thank you. And the last wish from Andreas.
Yeah, I can support a lot of these wishes, of course. Just my point would be to look at digitalization as a holistic topic, not only the agriculture sector, also the food sector, and to see how we can promote sustainability along the value chain by using digital technologies. And I said already mentioned what is needed for that. Open data, for example, would be one point, and investment in digital technologies and people. I can fully agree on that.
Okay, thank you. So before I hand over the microphone back to Martin, I would like to thank all of you for your interest. Especially I would like to thank those who actively ask questions. Only a few people, I think it was about 4 people asked questions in the chat. And my special thanks goes to the 4 representatives for sharing their insights. So thank you very much to you again. And this is the end of the session of track 1. And I will now give back to Martin.
Thank you very much. Thank you also, Professor Hessel, for moderating that session. And indeed, already this discussion has been quite a good Christmas gift to this conference, but also in general. So thank you to you, Professor Hessler, as well as all the speakers and the audience. So yeah, we are at the end of day 1 of our conference, Digital Transformation of the Agricultural Value Chain. And we hope you enjoyed the discussions and the presentations, and we are looking forward seeing you tomorrow here again at 9 a.m. for the second day of the conference. We start the morning with a look ahead at track 1 and offer a private space for policymakers in track 2. And in the afternoon, we will have the joy to listen to a panel discussion, which will bring together top-level speakers from the field of politics, science, and stakeholders in the field. And we will wrap up this conference with concluding remarks by experts from the Federal Ministry as well as EURAGRI. So, and if you have some time tonight, we invite you to have a look at the ministries as well as EURAGRI's website. They are really great resources to learn more about the topic. And with that being said, if you have some time left, you can also switch to track number 2. I think they are online today a little bit longer, so their program is still running. And from my side, thank you very much, and I wish you a very good evening.
Okay.